Hello, my name is Hazel. I have thoughts, lots of thoughts. They never stop thinking, and they never stop thinking. And I am really excited to be talking about this today. I'm also a fellow of the Nivenly Foundation, and I'm on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Working Group of the CNCF, because as it turns out, I can't actually hear. Luckily, there are no questions, so that sucks for you, but works great for me. And so, I am excited for this talk, but also I'm a little bit peeved because, quite honestly, the sorry state of affairs for interviewing really, really pisses me off. The bar for good interviewing is on the floor in hell, and all of you need to stop limboing underneath the bar, because none of you are that good at limboing. And so you can't even be good at limboing underneath the bar. You might as well get good at actually hiring. So, but speaking of getting good at hiring, what are we covering in the talk? So there's a lot of things we could cover. Importantly, this is not comprehensive. This is not the stone tablet truth. This is not the whole thing. We're focusing really on the things that you in the leadership can do something about. We're focusing on sort of all the differences of the archetypes, what you need, what you don't need, how to figure that out, and how I've done it and what's worked for me. And then you can take that, you can go back to your company, and then do better. All right, so resilience engineering is the thing that kind of sums up all of platform engineering, infrastructure, DevOps, SRE, whatever we decide to name the thing of making computer go burr without going changes every month, but you can actually think of all this as 4 different concepts, roughly, and you can bucket everything that you know into one of these 4. You have the ability for a system to bounce back. You have the ability for a system to tolerate some disruption. You have how does the system stretch nicely, and how do you, over time, make sure that everything keeps humming along? So it turns out that you need all 4 of these. Eventually, at the beginning, it could be one person, but at some point, you're going to need to hire more people or maybe even multiple teams. And so roughly, depending on what you need in your company right now, depending on the thing that you need, you can actually kind of map it to this. This works pretty well in my experience. So the rebound, SREs. SREs often do a lot of incidents. They tend to do a lot more of this, how to get the system back into stable, how to do that, figuring out how to have a bunch of uptime, have the availability, have all these, the building blocks of the system so that it can tolerate disruptions tends to be infrastructure, right? The graceful extensibility, this is the fun one. So what we see as platform engineering to date tends to be you're taking this sprawling mess of complexity, and then you're trying to make it easier, more compact, and easier to extend, easier to handle, easier to deal with, easier to work on top of. That graceful extensibility is at the heart of a lot of what we call platform engineering. And then, so developer experience, sustained adaptability, this is something that some people kind of stick somewhere else, and they call developer experience a different part of everything. I think it's intrinsically tied together with platform engineering. So you do need to think about it. When you think of how do you make this keep happening without people burning out, without whatever, a lot of it is the leadership. But in terms of tying that together into how developers actually work, developer experience does a lot of that. But then, in addition to the archetypes, there are things that I look for when I hire platform engineering, resilience engineering people that are really, really important, and they are a very accurate proxy of getting good at this thing. The first one is called intellectual humility. It's a really cool concept. Not a lot of people seem to know about it. But intellectual humility is this thing where when you're talking to someone and they go, oh, this is really awesome. But they have a lot of things to say, maybe a lot of knowledge, but they're very, very good at knowing what they know, what they don't know. They're extremely open to new ideas. They're not stubborn about learning things. They're happy to be corrected, and they tend to be able to work very, very cooperatively and collaboratively and learn together with people. That type of cross-functional collaboration with deep knowledge, you really, really need that. And intellectual humility is the name for that in psychology. So if you ever wondered, how do I not hire, assholes? I hire people with intellectual humility. Ecological awe is something else. A lot of people talk about passion, and later I will talk about why I hate passion. But passion is not really the thing you really want to look for. Ecological awe, on the other hand, that one's awesome. So that is, have you ever gone outside somewhere really, really pretty and just stood at the edge of a mountain, just looked at everything, and you went, wow, I'm so tiny. Or if you've ever experienced this feeling of awe overcome you at the complexity and the sprawl of things. Like, if you've ever looked at the landscape chart of the CNCF, you feel 95% horror of like, oh, and then 2% you that, wow, this is cool. That's the ecological awe part. You want that. But so for your first team, if you're sitting here and you're going, so I need this platform engineering thing, and I'm not quite sure what I need, but I haven't really hired a lot of people yet, so what you need typically is some generalists, but what you're looking for is you need to hire people that will help you eventually hire more people. Crucially, that's the important thing. A lot of people go, I want someone really, really smart. And then they hire people that are not prepared to later become leaders in the company. And then you're in a really, really tough spot. Because those people built a lot of stuff and they had a lot of opinions and they have a lot of all these other things. And now they're no longer going to be the leaders of their babies, and it's a whole painful thing. So your first team needs to know they will become leaders. They need to be prepared for that. And they need to go through the ego death of building a bunch of things and then watching it all get ripped apart later. If you can't do that, don't hire them. And if you can't hire platform engineering people, don't do computers. It's fine. So, how did I do this? And by this, what I mean is, at some previous companies, I had the opportunity to help build and grow a platform organization. And so, in the span of 8 weeks, my head of platform engineering and me, built a engineering pipeline, a hiring pipeline, figured everything out, did a series of interviews, and then hired about 16 people. Really, really high class, really performing teams, super, super excellent, and single-handedly between the two of us, we hit the diversity and hiring goals for the entire company. So how do we do this? Typically, I break it down to a couple different, stages and steps. These are kind of the minimal stages. You don't have to have an interview for each. You can have more than one interview, whatever. The important part is end-to-end time for people. It's just inhuman to make people wait around for 4 months, have 20 different interviews, and then go, I'm sorry, we're just going to reject you, and we can't tell you why. And thank you, please tell us to go fuck ourselves. And so, the 4 stages. We should know about each other. That's the one where you figure out, are they going to kind of work for us? Do they want to work for us? Do we sound appealing to them? You're selling yourself to them. You're figuring out more about them. It's great. And then there's the technical problem and the socio-technical problem. You want to figure out how well we solve things together, because platform engineering, more than any other discipline in engineering, deeply, deeply relies on collaboration. They all do, but this one in particular does. So you're not testing someone's quiz knowledge. You're not testing their, memorized vocabulary. You're testing, can they work together with you? Because you will be troubleshooting stuff, maybe at 3 in the morning, maybe sleep deprived, maybe doing a bunch of really terrible things, but together. And if you don't work together, it's not going to work. And then finally, they could have to work across the organization because platform engineering does not exist without its users. And so the users need to know who you are, you need to know who they are, and you need to be able to communicate with them. If they can't, you can't hire them. Speaking of hiring them, you are probably fucking up. So here's a list of a whole bunch of different ways in which you're ruining your pipeline and you don't even necessarily realize it. A pattern that I see so frequently is people trying really, really hard at the beginning of the pipeline to have maybe a diverse pipeline, a diverse set of a talent pool, a lot of different candidates from different walks of life, and then they filter all these candidates through a gentle sieve designed to select for skill, and then you get a bunch of mediocre white dudes through a completely unbiased, quote-unquote, process. And so if your demographics don't roughly match the in and the out, via the pigeonhole principle, you're not selecting on talent, you're selecting on a whole bunch of things that proxy to the other thing. So interviews are not hazing rituals. You need to actually track your after-hire indicators. You hire a bunch of people to look good on paper. Do they look good not on paper? And also, one thing that you see a lot, particularly in big tech companies or some of the larger types of companies that hire the best, is none of their current engineers can pass the current interview process without going, oh, I need to study for like 4 months in order to be able to, invert a hashing algorithm, binary tree bullshit. And that means they're not using it on the job. So then why are you using that to hire them, right? So if you have current engineers and they're high performing, they can pass the interview process with flying colors without studying, right? Right? Because you're selecting for what they're good, you're selecting for their work. And you already have the answer key. Use the answer key. Whiteboard coding is actually worse than useless. And so this is kind of the more contentious one sometimes, but really, really important when you're selecting things, when you're looking at stuff, when you're trying to figure out things. Anything that results in memorization, anything that you have to worry about cheating in an answer is useless. Think about it. You're in the middle of an incident. You're in the middle of building something out. You're trying to figure out how to build a really, really successful product. At what point do you go to your engineers and do you say, okay, so you built this really cool thing, but did you cheat? Did you look up maybe some ideas on how to, of course they did. Nobody just sits there in a clean room and then imagines out of the ether how to maybe build something. Like, nobody pulled Kubernetes out of their ass like that. Is far too complex to have just been organically discovered. People had to take a simple idea and then hammer the fuck out of it for 20 years until it got this complicated. So, of course, people look things up. Of course, people look at things. If you have to design an interview loop when you're concerned about cheating, don't. Every single time I've interviewed people, every single time I've designed an interview, it's open book, it's open internet, it's open AI. We will actually even screen share them working through the process if we want to. We will look things up together. We'll do the whole thing. If the AI can solve the problem, cool. Whatever. It turns out the AI will lie to you about 60 to 70% of the time, and if they can figure that out and reason about that, well, excellent. If they can't, also a signal. I really, really hate the word passion. When it comes to, I look for passion in people. Because most of the time, when you look for passion in people, it means I want a plucky, strapping young lad. It's always a lad. A young, plucky, strapping lad who will work from 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. and who will do all the things and be paid in coffee and exposure. That's not good talent. Why do you think that's good talent? What? No. So, don't do that. Instead, ecological arm is a great alternative. Things where you're looking for this aesthetic sense of, I do care about this. I have maybe a sense of craftsmanship, but passion is not required for your job, right? Like your job is the money in, money out, work in, work. It's cool. It's a transaction. Nobody walks up to the store and they go, I'm passionate about buying water bottles. Transaction. Cool. If you look for side projects is a thing that when you're interviewing people, I actually, on the tram, on the tube, sorry to call you out in the audience, but on the tube, someone said, oh, yeah. And we started talking about what I was going to talk about today. And he said, yeah, I've done so many interviews. I've done over 100. I always look for all the different side projects people do. I want to hear about your side projects. And all I can hear about is, I make my wife raise the kids. I have all this free time. I have all this. So when you're thinking about an interview loop, when you're designing it, what are the environmental conditions that make this happen? Someone has 1 million side projects. Cool. Why do they have the time for that? How do they have the time for that? How does that occur? And if you're looking for only people where this is the case, what are you looking for? If you want to hire someone who's brilliant, why the hell would you narrowly select yourself to someone who's brilliant and who manages to have 73 hours of time in their day? What? You don't even have 70 hours in a day. Like, how are you? What? Maybe people who are brilliant also have 3 kids. Maybe they also have to work another job. Maybe they're maybe they're living a life, right? People can live a life. There is the outside. There is the outdoors. It does exist. And speaking of what you're selecting for, there's a character called Moneyball, which got famous in baseball, which is where you used to have a hiring process in baseball that looked suspiciously like what software engineering hiring does today. And it was great because it selected a whole bunch of white dudes and it put everybody in there and they went, this is the best talent in the entire world. I'm sure there's 8 billion other people on the planet, but these are the only good baseball players out there. And then someone actually sat down and rather than looking at the aesthetics and the vibe of how people did the baseball, they used math and did a data-driven decision. The data-driven decision that everybody says that they do, but this person actually did it. And then they built a kick-ass team. Won the World Series, whatever, for basically like $20. And then everybody else said, wait, what? You can do that? You can also do that in software engineering too. So it turns out, because there's so much discrimination in software engineering right now, and because the job market tends to be terrible because a whole bunch of people get overlooked because they can't invert a binary tree by demand, you can get a lot of world-class talent that fits great for your team, that fits great for your company by just expanding the pool to everybody. If you just do that and just think about it, just a tiny bit, you can even strategically look for areas where nobody else is looking, and you're going to find so many really cool people. So many cool people. And this is my favorite strategy. I do this all the time. It's called, I don't forcibly select out different demographics, and boom, amazing, amazing. Another thing that's hard about this is good research on actually assessing talent, good background information, good objective studies on how to do this correctly. They don't exist, they probably never will. And it kind of sucks, but normally it's just not something that's going to happen, which is fine. But if you're looking for a lot of concrete evidence on how to do this correctly, you just might not find it, and that's okay. So, systems thinking tends to come easier to discriminated demographics. Turns out, when your entire life is an existential crisis, when you have been doing incident response since you were 5 years old, when you have been doing a whole bunch of deep, resource optimization, when the entire system is conspiring to ruin your life, you get really good about reasoning about the system, about the non-local effects, about the non-linear effects. You're, statistically speaking, much better at this. And so, in theory, you don't necessarily even want, a 50-50 split or an even-sided demographics. If you look for these types of demographics, just think about that. Statistically, they're much better at platform engineering than a lot of other people because they've been doing it. Like, they're the kind of people that show up and they say, oh, I have 20 years of experience, and they're 17 years old. That's where that comes from. And so if you look at your hiring pipeline and you go, you have a whole bunch of really privileged people that have never had a single day in their life where they've had to think about any hard choices. Or people who've been doing platform engineering since 04. Which one's going to maybe be better at it? Just think about it. Overall, platform engineers are the socio-technical adaptive capacity of your organization. When you're hiring for the skill set, you are taking the adaptive capacity of your technical system, the adaptive capacity of your people system, and the glue in the middle, the mesh, the grinding of the gears, the weird slip differential in the middle, that is your platform engineers. They're going to need to be really, really good at that. When you're looking for something in your organization, that's the shape of people you want. And overall, platform engineers, hiring for them is hiring for systems thinking. So when you're looking for the system thinking, when you're looking for what makes this good, how can I make this great, how can I do this, you have to understand the holistic experience of systems thinking is far broader than computers. I would rather hire a gardener any day than most software engineers for platform engineering. Because gardeners will sit there and they'll tell you about these plants over here, affects these plants over here, this plant needs to rain because this other thing, and they start describing the whole system of how they balance this entire ecosystem. You can do that. We even literally have projects in the CNCF named after gardening, named after these metaphors because it's so prevalent. System thinking is what you're looking for, not YAML engineering. So when it comes to looking for that excellence, when it comes to figuring out what the best is, throw away the concept of best, throw away the concept of hiring for elites, throw away the hazing rituals, throw away the whiteboard interviews, and figure out these humans, how do they work together, how do they work with us, and how do we work together to build something beautiful. If you figure that out, you'll be in good shape. Thank you.